So I should have started off with this. Whether we call this a project or in this case, a value increment, right? This is a value increment canvas, but we could have had a business case here or a project charter here with a whole bunch of examples, these are features that we need to do.
Well, I mean, if you can cluster your individual things into a cohesive thing, then you can call it a project. But this might be part of your ongoing workflow as well, where you have an existing product and you have continuous improvement, which is one of the things that the WOW book actually talks about. Is I think a lot of people forget that projects are subservient elements of the product life cycle, and the product life cycle is dynamic, and you want to be able to engage your qualities of execution on whatever life cycle that you are in the product. And that might be you might be in inception, you might be in cash cow phase, you might be wherever, but you can still use some of these things and have an impact.
Yeah. And so what I want to show is, I'm going to go back to the browser for a minute, because this is one of the things that it kind of drives this home a little bit more, and how the board I'm showing you is intended to be used. Because you're not going to just sit down and over the course of an hour or a day go through all the content on that board. That's not the intent.
Well, I think your eyes would fall out.
Exactly. So if I were looking through this and there was a question, it's like persona. All right. So I'm going to click on it. I'm in the browser. It's going to, open up the side window. Detailed descriptions of fictional people who fill roles as stakeholders of the solution being developed. Personas have been around forever, right? I mean, this is just one of the ways we can.
To kind of tie into what you're saying, I mean, for people who are maybe not familiar with DA, they'll look at this and I know right off the top of my head 10 or 5 different versions of personas. This is something you can pick up. It's kind of by association. You look at the word, you double check whether you're talking about the same thing. This is something that would be quick learning. I think there's other things in here where you're going to have to deep dive a little bit if you're not familiar with it.
And I'll click on one. What's a technical story? Well, it's a simple strategy for capturing quality requirements that are similar to an explicit list. We can write these requirements very similar to a user story. But you might not understand what that is. And this is one of the ones you can see in the upper right-hand corner. There's not a reference here. So what I'm providing in this approach is what we can do is and there's links to this, right? If I went back up so here's what technical stories here's examples, right? So this is an example-based approach to show that to create this functionality, there are some additional technical things that we need to do. And again, we could open this up and take a look at, this is where it would initially have been identified, right? There's no acceptance criteria. And I could then go further over here in the timeline, because this is all just team norms, right? I don't want to overwhelm everyone. These are just examples to go through, right? And I could get all the way over here to my starting point, which is going to be construction. And I could go back to one of those technical stories. And, if I'm opening these, actually, I need to find one a little bit further along. I'll have acceptance criteria and all the content in it. So there's all the high impact practices that the inception phase in Disciplined Agile is going to recommend, and the things that I've tied into with the quick start, so that you don't just have a one-line description. You've got a lot more than that. You understand what it looks like potentially to implement it and what it's going to take. The other thing I'll show as I get into construction is that this gets to where we're telling a story with this. So I can go from the work that was in that value increment canvas to finding a feature, to finding a story that is needed for that feature to be implemented. And we're going to follow that story through its life. It's sort of telling it through the eyes of a requirement that you're implementing. How does that story make its way to where it is prioritized high in the backlog, is pulled into the workflow via a iteration planning event? How does it then go through like the types of tasks that we might see to get that story implemented, validated, right? So it meets our definition of done, and how that it supports that feature. And this is a Kanban board at the feature level, right? So this is a reference model or reference example is I just kind of now scroll backwards to say, if you don't know what a technical story is, or you don't know how technical stories would be implemented, if you don't know how to create a definition of ready or a definition of done, you don't understand what a story map is. You're unsure about how a product owner would, prioritize the backlog. Well, here is an approach to show there's these quantitative things that we need to consider and what's important at this moment in time for the work we're doing. And then, qualitative, the things like getting feedback from our customers, keeping up with competition, improving the customer journey. So this gives you, as I zoom out, I'm now going to go back up here. Oops, a little bit too far zoomed out. I'm going to go back to what we're providing. So we've moved Disciplined Agile from here's the approach to choosing your way of working, to augmenting that with concrete points on this adoption spectrum to say, if you want to get here to the Agile lifecycle, or you want to do continuous delivery Agile, here are the practices you're going to need to consider being able to do to make that work. There's other stuff you have to do, right? I showed in the example, there's things you're probably already doing. And if you can't do that, then let's move a little bit here to the left to a point that you're able to make some improvements, solve some challenges, reduce some of the impediments and friction in your delivery process. All of the examples in these reference models just provide another way to see what those practices are in action. And it's not saying you have to write your stories exactly like this, or you need to create your definition of ready exactly like this. But I can't tell you how often, especially in certification courses, people look at some of this and say, oh, that sounds like a brilliant idea. Can you show me what it looks like? Well, DA doesn't have any examples in it.
Yeah.
Right.
You just zoomed out, and I'd like to zoom out as well and ask you the question. You've shown that Disciplined Agile doesn't just work on a strategic and a tactical level, but it can go very granular on a micro level to the operation, which is a great, a safety ring for people who are looking for a process and a support system. Let me ask you this question from a zoom out perspective.
Yep.
How do you sell this to an organization? Because it's the people that have to sign off on this are not the people who are going to follow this or understand this or appreciate its value.
Excellent question. So rarely would I show anywhere near this level of depth, right? I mean, because that's not what people at the decision making typically want to see or should be seeing, because it would take a lot of time for them to understand it. So I'm going to bring it back up to a higher level and say it's starting with what are the things you're trying to see from an improvement perspective, and then at least being able to say, yeah, you're interested in team level Agile. Great. I might show the ways of working spectrum and give a high level overview of why moving to Agile is not easy. You might have people that have told you in the past, sure, take this training and everybody's going to be able to get there. That's not reality.
They're looking for the quick Band-Aid approach.